and our responses, particularly in the light of freshwater and carbon. And that's fantastic and essential, of course, but it's very easy to lose sight of a couple of things. One is that people need to be able to farm profitably, they need to be able to farm productively, and they need to be able to fit farm systems to the land and the climate and the people in a way that provides the best outcomes. And that is, and this is where I'm heading, that is a complex jigsaw puzzle. Right? It's not easy to kind of say how do we fit a farm system best to the land and everything else that goes around that. And it's very easy in today's world of sort of 20-second sound bites to look for what's the silver bullet. Oh, we just feed our cattle seaweed and we'll be right, or whatever else it might be. And we know that farm systems are complex, they have feedback loops, it's not that simple. And today we have some people in the room who have some fantastic experience and some learnings from working through farm systems in both a research and a practical way. So we're very excited to hear from those people. I'm going to invite Graham Ogle to come up now, and Graham's going to jump up and down during the day introducing people. I guess Graham has done a lot of work in recent weeks working with many of you, organising today, and on behalf of Rezare Systems, we're very grateful for that work as well. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Andrew. Rezare's been planning to run this workshop for quite some time, and it's a real pleasure to have a room full of all the people we want here for this workshop. What I want to do is just cover why we're running the workshop and a little bit about how. I think this is a chance for... Rezare's been looking for the chance to have a bit of a, and I found the word the other day, a policy refresh, a strategy refresh, sorry. Very cool word. And we thought, what better way is there to have a strategy refresh than invite all the right people, and we think you're all the right people, to a venue and talk about what we see as really valuable to farmers. What is value? What is value when we say, of all the things we can provide a farmer, what are the valuable things? I guess I started my career, my idea of that really was forged out of when I started my career in the 1980s, which meant that I had 2 decades of excruciatingly low product prices to work with for farmers. I remember sitting with a farmer one day, he was in trouble, the farm was going to get sold up, and I thought, if we get $35 a lamb, you'd be right. And of course, the markets weren't delivering that. Now, you can adjust that by whatever you like, whatever inflation index you like. The CPI would mean that farmers today would be getting $55 a lamb. And I imagine our budgeting would be even more difficult today given the increase in costs. Dairy farmers were getting $2.40 a kilo of milk solids. I mean, it's almost unheard of. And if we ramp that up by the CPI, we'd be talking about a payout today of $3.70. So this was a sort of the anvil that forged my early career, and going out to do things for farmers that were of value. The biggest value we could do for farmers then was increase their profitability, and that started to address all the other problems that were on the farm. So when Rezare set out, as we did in 2004, as a group dedicated to agricultural software development, often we sit around and think, is our strategy aligned with where the value is in the industry? Are we aligning our investment in resources where the value resides in the industry? So what we're going to do today is we're going to think, how might we align our investment with what top farmers are saying is important to them? And I can't think of any better way to start this workshop than listening to some top farmers. So that's what we're doing. I think consulting is also an extension of farming, and we'll listen to consultants after that. The farmers that we'll listen to have been through some process of change or intensive planning. And it's from those discussions that we hope you'll pick up some things about what they value. And maybe a successful outcome of this workshop is if you go home and think, hey, maybe we need a strategy refresh as well. Right, I'm not going to say that it's a panel discussion now. And with waning confidence, I think it's you, Martin.
Sorry.
Just as Martin's coming up, Martin, you're the ward councillor for beef and lamb in the Waikato King Country, a farmer also close to Blair. I first met Martin at a field day at Blair's place where I presented some results. I pulled that presentation out just recently and I thought, how did I expect farmers to understand that? It was quite complicated. But I remember on the day you understood it. Yeah, so I thought, I like that guy. And the other thing I know about you is you travel a lot. Because we spend most of our time meeting in airports.
We do.
Yeah,
we do. Cool.
So,
thank
you.
You. Appreciate it. Thanks, Graham. I appreciate that. Look, as Graham said, my first role as a farmer, I'm about one farm away from Blair and Anna in Aria. But my second role is a Director of Beef and Lamb New Zealand and New Zealand Meat Board. So I've been doing that for 3 years. Given me a really good insight into how farmers think and some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment. So I want to talk more from a director's beef and lamb side than I do from a farmer side. There's a whole lot of guys in this room that are way better farmers than me, so if I start talking about farmers, I know I'm in the wrong space. So I'm going to talk about it from a beef and lamb perspective. So I farm 800 hectares and 120 hectares of that is biodiversity and 680 hectares is in grazing land for sheep and beef. And I think that's how we need to start talking about our farms in the future. We've got a bunch of land that we're looking after, but we all think of it as farming livestock, but actually there's other reasons we can have that land. And in my case, I'm lucky enough to have 120 hectares of biodiversity, which is native bush and riparian areas. So we've kind of changed a little bit from the 1980s and the 1970s, if you remember. We had an economic reset. We lost a whole lot of subsidies. We had a whole bunch of farm sales because guys were leveraged up too much. And we had huge interest rates. So it chucked a lot of people out the door. But what that did, certainly for our sector, and I think the dairy sector as well, it changed our focus. And it changed our focus from being subsidy driven to being facing the market and going, actually guys, what have we got to do here to be really relevant? And what that led to was increased productivity, a much more market focus. So what do we need to produce for those consumers overseas so they're going to keep buying it? We've talked about that in the dairy sector already. What do we need to do to produce a product that our consumers are going to buy? So we did that, and along with that, our processes have diversified. So we've been sending a whole lot of lamb, for example, to the UK. 228,000 tonnes we have a quota into there at the moment. At the moment, we're utilising probably about a third of that. So what's happened is we've diversified away from the UK into China, into the US, into Singapore, into a whole bunch of other countries. It's given us a whole lot more options, but added a whole lot more value. So that's been great. And just to demonstrate that productivity gain, for example, in our sector, for example, lamb, the amount of kgs of lamb sold per ewe, up 104% from the 1990s. It's massive. So we've got to pat ourselves on the back for that and say, guys, we've come a long way. Dairy production up 49%. So there's not many sectors that have had those sort of gains. Certainly agriculture's done a really good job. We've just done some analysis at Beef and Lamb, the Economic Service, We've just done some analysis. So we've been more profitable in the last 10 years than we have in the last 60. We've had access to low capital cost, so low interest rates. It's been amazing. There's no sector in this country that's had the productive gain that we have had in the red meat sector. Demand has never been higher for protein. And if you want to get out of farming, actually your land's worth a lot anyway. So there's a lot to be thankful for. You know, we're in a really good space as farmers, but there's a huge concern out there around the environment. And we can't decouple that from what's going on in our farms. So I guess at beef and lamb at the moment, we kind of think of farming or the environment as part of everyday life. This is what we do. You can't separate it out anymore. It's kind of part of the deal now. We used to think of environment as sitting out here, but it's not. It's what we do in our own farms. So the farmers are concerned about the coming environmental regulation. Remember, this is just part of farming. What does compliance look like? We haven't worked that out at Beef and Lamb yet because it's changing all the time. It's coming at us real quick. And I don't think the government really knows yet what compliance looks like. What's that going to mean for their productive systems? And what does climate change really mean? And we've talked about that a few times already. How do our summers look? How do our winters look? And Fraser's talked this morning about, you know, working a system for his particular area of the country that's been highly profitable, so he's managed to nail it. Now, why haven't all his neighbours done that? What's stopping them from doing that? He's a precise person, he loves data, he loves numbers, but probably the neighbours don't. So how do you deal with that in the tech sector? I call these things called pain points. So how do we get change? And I call them pain points. So how can we solve farmers' pain points? It's more likely that farmers will pay for a service that will deal with the issues they're concerned about. So the issues they're concerned about right now are the environment. That might not be true for all farmers. In Blair's case, it could be how to get the ewes here and how do you get those lambs out. So he'll go and find some stuff to do that. But everyone will have a different pain point. So this is a graph, and it's been talked about already, about the spread of profitability for our farmers. So this is for an average farm in New Zealand. We've aggregated all the farms, aggregated all the incomes. So you can see it's a massive bell curve. Some guys earning less than $300 per hectare, some guys earning plus $1,600. I suggest the guys in this room are probably at the top end. And they're probably using a whole bunch of tech to get them where they are. So what's stopping that middle group? Is the tech too hard? Is it too complex? Are they just not into it? Are they just not interested in farming? Or what is it about this graph? Why can't we move that to the right? There's a whole lot of research sitting on our shelves that farmers aren't using. Those guys on the right are probably using it, but the guys in the middle aren't. So what do we need to do to shift that bell curve to the right? I don't think it's hard tech. I think it's really easy tech. It's likely that those guys on the right are using body condition scoring. The guys in the middle aren't. As Fraser talked about the greenhouse gas calculator, how the Farmex can, give you a specific number down to the 0.0 or whatever it is. Actually, the greenhouse gas calculator that we've just developed is not for Fraser's. It's for the guy in the middle. It's got to be really simple. It's got to take 10 minutes and then the job done. So Beef and Lamb New Zealand essentially works in the market failure space. We do the things that farmers can't do by themselves, and we do the things that farmers don't value. So that's specifically true in the genetic space. Someone's talked about buying Hereford bulls that someone just got out of his cows and left the nuts in. So the dairy farmers that buy that bull don't value genetics. So that's why we're in that space, because they don't see the value of it. How do you promote that? The environment, the conversations we have in Wellington, farmers can't do that as individuals. We have to do that for them. And the same with research. It's kind of a collective thing. They can't do that individually either. So we do play in the market failure space, and I suggest probably Dairy NZ does as well. So just as a simple farmer, I see things really simply. And my view on life is there's 4 ways to be more profitable. I used to say 3, but I've added the bottom one in because I think it's important. You can increase production, and we've been doing that, and I've just showed you some of those figures, how we've increased production. And I think that's got a level that's going to get harder to do, and especially with a whole lot of environment rules coming out now. We can lower our costs. That sometimes can be a negative. We can increase the price received for our product. The price we're getting for our product now is amazing, and the dairy industry as well. So we've got to be thankful for that. Or the last one is change land use, and we've seen that guys going from forestry to sheep and beef, or sheep and beef to dairy, and now dairy into avocados or kiwi fruit. So people looking for the dollar. So I just want to split that in sort of in the last couple of minutes, is talk about, I've kept those splits, and I've looked at some of the things that we could do in those spaces, quite specific. So what I've gone and asked my colleagues at Beef and Lamb about some of the things that we think we could do in that tech space. So these are not all my thoughts. Some of them are, but don't rely on them as the Beef and Lamb gospel, please. So we need easy and accurate measure of forage. So if you go back to the graph I showed you, why aren't these guys measuring their grass? We know there's some huge gains can be had there. I think we need to be able to measure diverse species. It's not just a ryegrass clover mix often. There'll be a bit of plantain in there, a whole bunch of other stuff. It needs to be quick and easy, like a point and shoot. And how many times have we heard the name phone today, the word phone, using stuff off our phone? Can we actually go out into a paddock and just take some photographs as we drive across the paddock? That needs to be intuitive, and it needs to be uploaded straight away into our computer programs. It needs to be seamless. The more times we have to do this stuff, and sit at our computers like Blair does, I agree. We hate it. So it's got to be intuitive. And coming down to allocating that sort of that pasture to mobs, and then maybe down to an individual level, is really important as well. How much time have I got? 3 minutes. Geez. All right, so lower costs, less inputs, better outcomes. So measuring metabolites for accurate measurement of animal health. So there's things in the blood that you can measure that'll give us a bead on facial eczema, parasitism and mineral deficiencies. Can we do that at an individual level? Can we make that really easy rather than have to send stuff to a lab? Point and shoot. Blair's talked about getting cattle and spending time weighing stuff so you can put that data into Farmax. Is it possible we could go out to a farm with our phone and take a shot of a cattle beast and give us a weight? Is there opportunities to do that? Imagine how much more data you could gather and how much more accurate you could be in those selling decisions and that forecasting decisions. Counting sheep by phone. Surely there's an algorithm we can put up where you just hold the phone up and they'll run past and you've got an accurate measurement. Probably not going to save a lot of time, but it makes it a hell of a lot easier to ask your board to go and do it. This technology's got to be available. Higher price received. So this is kind of end-to-end traceability. So if we're going to extract more out of the market, we have to tell our story. And that story needs to be backed up by facts and figures. And if you've ever had an icebreaker Tuesday, and I see there's a number in this room, they've got a little number on them. which traces back to the farm. I think potentially we're going to have to do that for our products as well, to give those consumers surety that there's an opportunity, that we're doing the right thing by the environment, by our animals. We know that if you stick a regen label on a product, we can get 20% extra in the market. What are we going to do to try and gain that 20% to give us a higher price in the market? We're going to have to tell our story better, and that's going to mean traceability. Change of land use. One of the first questions I asked when I got into the boardroom is, are we farmers of sheep and beef, or are we farmers of the land? Because there's a difference. And I think if we're constrained by farming the things we've done in the past, then our future is going to be a little bit more difficult. It's likely we're going to have to eat 10% less grass to drop our methane levels in the future. What's going to become the most profitable use of that land? We need a mosaic of land uses. What are the other opportunities? So are there programs out there that can come onto our farm with the farm mapping and give us some opportunities to look at different opportunities on our properties? I think that's going to become really important. There'll be some stuff around precision environmental management, understand your externalities. That's already been talked about. What's my methane level? What's my carbon, nitrogen and sediment? That's going to be a given that we're going to have to do that stuff. And intuitive farm mapping. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there, but I haven't found an easy one yet. And as Bob said, once you've got a farm map and you've got some LUC class, then you can really drill down to what's the best use of that land. May not be farming sheep and beef or cattle. So that's me. Appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
So I guess, stand in front of the microphone, just a few reflections on the day, and I'll keep this brief. So the first thing I thought about was the messages from our practitioners in the morning sessions. So the people, the farmers and the people who are working closely with farmers. And they talked about, unashamedly stolen from your slides, folks, people, planet, performance. And I've just kind of expanded those out a bit more. We talked about the importance of people, and I think we've reflected on that during the day. There were questions about what's stopping data interoperability, and the answer was people. There were questions about how do we get adoption, and we talked about the need for specialists, and so a lot of it comes back to the importance of people in our thinking. Mathematical equations are great, but people are very important. Planet, we've talked about. The need to make sure that we're farming within the constraints that we've got and doing the right things for our land and our planet. Performance, and I've added, and productivity there, and Martin's questions are good ones. We want to include, we know we often fall into talking about improving production, right? And we know we don't want to talk about improving production, we want to talk about improving productivity. The measure of what we're getting out, and the bottom line measure of that is profit, as long as the other factors are equal for the amount of inputs put in and for the amount of emissions going out. Then something that I got out of those farmers who talked this morning is their strong emphasis on planning, on the processes that they and their teams follow, the communication of those processes, and the precision with which they go and measure. They identify what are the important things for them to measure in their systems, and they go and measure them. And together that, that was talked about as systematisation, turning things into a system that's repeatable, and I think that's key. So some great learnings for me in those areas today. We talked, for those who are involved in research and in governance, we talked about capabilities, and I guess my reflection, thinking about some of the presentations, was the amount of amazing capability that we've had leveraged in this sector over many years in our science R&D and all of the things that underpin that, some fantastic capability. And I think that goes to the heart of what you were talking about before, Graham. Other countries are investing in their core competencies, and in New Zealand we've made a lot of investment, not enough, but a lot of investment in building capability in pastoral agriculture and its underpinnings, which has been fantastic. There's some really valuable collections. We talked about the virtual climate stations, we talked about S-maps, and we've talked about some of the other collections that are out there. I didn't want to just say databases because there's a lot more than just databases. Almost every speaker talked about the opportunity to collaborate further, to engage further, to use data from other sources, whether that's climate stations or soils data or any of the other data sets that are potential to use, and the opportunity to engage together. And we see that in some of the collaborative projects that have been done. We talked a little bit about data integration, and to me there's some real benefits in being able to link data and to have common identifiers and all of those necessary things that make it easier to connect the dots between systems, and also consistency in meaning and interpretation, and are we talking about the same things? And then this afternoon we talked about our, and you know, I'm playing some fun games here, but we talked a little bit about sensing. We started off by talking from space, which is very much built on sensing technologies. But I thought, particularly when I was listening to Dean as well, that's another great example of sourcing data so that farmers aren't having to go and measure it. You know, imagine if you as a farmer, and farmers did have to do this, some still do, go and attend every sale yard that they can so that they know what the prices are. Try and keep their own little book so that they know, you know, where prices are heading. But there are tools that can deliver that data just as space can deliver pasture cover data. And I think we saw through the work that Ravensdown and Balance are doing a bunch of other sensing and use of predictive tools to take some of the effort that farmers would have out of sort of capturing data and making sense of it. A lot of the tools we looked at, including FarmMax and including the tools that Ravensdown and Balance have been working on, have been around making predictions that help people make either recommendations or decisions, and that's really powerful. And I think there's been some, again, a thread of discussion going through around, well, how do we then extend those services out? If you've got other crops you want to measure with space, how do you do that? Can we extend those services? If you've got some data that's in FarmMax or one of these other tools, how do we make it available? How do we make data flow into FarmMax? I think my other observation is that we're still at the stage where many of these tools, maybe space being an exception here, require the assistance of somebody, a specialist, to help interpret them, right? Whether that's a rep or an agri manager in a fertiliser company, and we know there's good reasons why we should be doing that, or a consultant to help you with FarmMax. And I'm not saying, you know, we know those roles are essential and important, but if we're to move to support for adoption and use, we need to think about how we kind of leverage the time of those people, right? So that they're doing the things that only they can do, and that our tools and our systems are easier to use so that specialists don't have to get involved at every step in the way. So I guess that's my kind of reflections on what we've talked about today. I hope that, like me, this has been of interest to you, that you've had your eyes opened to some interesting things that people have been doing and some opportunities. I think it's been great to have the input from the farmers and the practitioners to kind of ground truth what the problems are that we're trying to solve. And what we're hoping is that this conversation continues on. So if you're on Zoom or if you're here in the room, hopefully you've made some contacts or you've made some notes of people you should talk to, and we'd really encourage you to continue to do that. If there's any way that Rezare can facilitate those discussions for you, we're happy to do that as well. So thank you very much.